Hello again. A recent incident in London illustrates perfectly how the trendy idea of critical race theory is allowing black people a free pass to engage in racist behaviour without the risk of being branded racists and called out on their behaviour. I give a link in the description to this video to a news item concerning what most of us would describe as a racist attack in London on Wednesday night. Two old Orthodox Jewish men were closing up their shop in Haringey for the night when a young black guy appeared and launched a ferocious and unprovoked assault upon them. The object did not appear to be robbery, nor had they provoked the young man in any way at all. Look at the video to which I give a link. This young man simply attacks and beats up the two others for no apparent reason. Most of us would conclude that this is a racially motivated attack. That is to say that the black man attacks the old men simply because they are obviously Jews. This is certainly the view of the police, by the way, who have now charged an 18-year-old with racially aggravated actual bodily harm against his victims. So far, so good. We are all of us able to agree that this constitutes a racist attack, right? Well, no. Not if you are an up-to-date and with it liberal who believes in the tenets of critical race theory. I read out this morning a definition of racism from a modern book for children, which says that racism is, and I quote, "Racism is about prejudice and power. If a white person discriminates against a person of colour, they are prejudiced, and what makes the difference hold the social power in that exchange." You see how this at first sounds innocuous, but on second reading is really awful. For many years, racism was defined as either exhibiting racial prejudice or holding the view that different races and ethnicities have different characteristics. This means, of course, that a Chinese employer in London or Chicago who refused to give a job to a black person because he did not like people who were black was behaving in a racist fashion. Most of us would see it that way. According to critical race theory and the definition which I have just read out from this book, this is not racism because the Chinese man does not have power in a white society. He is an ethnic minority. In the same way, the black guy who beat up those two old Jews cannot be a racist, even if he did so because he hates Jews. This is because black people do not hold social power in Britain. This allows any member of any ethnic minority to dislike any other ethnicity and even to act on that dislike violently without it ever being possible to accuse the person of racism. It is a free pass. So it is that we see in the latest online definition of racism by Merriam-Webster, the authoritative American dictionary, now includes this new concept saying that racism is the systemic oppression of a racial group to the social, economic and political advantage of another. At once, we see that in the Western world, racism becomes an exclusively white practice. In both Europe and North America, it is by and large white people who are in control of the social, economic and political systems which may be used for oppression, and so they alone are capable of racism. The definition of racism as simple prejudice or discrimination has now disappeared. For most of us, this is of more than academic interest because we know that prejudice on racial grounds is horribly common in all countries and among every ethnicity, but that it is usually carried out on a haphazard and informal basis rather than a means to inflict systemic oppression. Ghanaians sometimes speak disparagingly of Nigerians. Black Caribbeans make unfortunate remarks about Africans, suggesting that they are backward and unsophisticated. It is not uncommon for black people to express antipathy towards Jews, Koreans or Pakistanis. The list of such racial prejudice or discrimination, to use Merriam-Webster's old definition, is lengthy and depressing. All this has now been wiped clean, and white people alone are to be blamed for any racism which is seen. This is why books intended for children such as this one are so pernicious. They lay all the blame for racism on white people and in effect say that black people, Indians, and those of Chinese origin can never be racist in Britain or America. This strikes many of us as quite ludicrous. And this book, by the way, you can find it on Amazon, is listed as a teacher's pick. In other words, an awful lot of teachers are buying it, and they are now indoctrinating school children in Britain into this new way of thinking. The way of thinking which insists that white people alone are capable of racism.